Public perception can be a touchy subject because it gives an outer glimpse into an inner world that some people may not want to reveal. And that's where the front comes in. And because of their background, Negroes had to put on a front more often than they may have wanted to. So let's hear about that. We're continuing from the 1945 book Black Metropolis by Dr. St. Clair Drake and Horace Caton. Service. Over and over, people in Bronzeville told interviewers that
it's not what you do that counts, but how you do it.
We're about to find out how some of them did it, so buckle up. This dictum is applied to varied aspects of behavior: dancing, liquor drinking, wife beating, church going, by those who maintain a rather stable and relatively high standard of living. So for some who were said to have high standards, it wasn't the acts in themselves, the liquor drinking, dancing, church going, or the wife beating that was approved or disapproved. It was the way that they were done. What does that mean? It means that if it was kept quiet in the person's home, or if the people didn't do it in public, then it might have been acceptable. There is a very sharp division, as we shall see later, between those who value front, who stress decorous public behavior, and those who don't. Those who at least wanted to present themselves a certain way in public, even if they weren't really like that, and those who could care less. A division between those who acted and spoke a certain way that was considered acceptable in public, and those who were loud like they still lived out in the country. Both of those types of people existed at this time. Pay attention. Because of the stress that the dicties place upon correct public behavior, they are often the target of the less sophisticated people who dub them hypocrites, because a portion of them were faking the funk. What do I mean by that? Observe.
Dr. St. Clair Drake, sociologist from Roosevelt University in Chicago.
I tend to do conceptualize class that way myself. One of the ways I like to think about it is this. Some years ago, when Horace Caton and I were working on Black Metropolis, we were suddenly struck by the fact that you could find two Negroes who worked in the stockyards as what we used to like to call cattle eviscerators, taking out the insides of the cattle as they came along on the assembly line. And let us assume that both of them were making about $400 a month. One comes home and on the way home stops by the local tavern, imbibes a good bit of alcohol. By the time he gets home, he's in a very bad mood. He knocks on the door and it isn't opened quickly. He yells up at his wife and she sticks her head out the window and curses him. And then everybody up and down the street begins to throw up the windows and look. She comes out and he beats her, and they finally get on in the house, and they both start taking their drinks, and the fight goes on. Now the other man takes his 400 and he passes the bar, turning his head the other way. And when he arrives at home, his wife also doesn't open the door quickly enough. But he waits until he gets inside, and then the fight starts inside. And when he gets ready to beat her, he pulls down the shades to make sure that the neighbors don't see. And then having got that part of it over, they sit down at the kitchen table and decide how much of the money they're going to put aside for the educational fund for the kids, and how much they're going to put in church next Sunday. And this is the end of the day.
That's why they called them hypocrites. Let's continue. They are constantly gossiped about by people who do not value front and who exult at finding a chink in the stuck-up's armor, and you can believe they did a good deal of searching. But one of the most fundamental divisions in Bronzeville is that between people who stress conventional, middle-class American public behavior and those who ignore it. Why does there have to be a fundamental division here? Because there's a cultural clash. One side thinks it was better to behave like middle-class Americans, while the others said, forget all that. Neither side was budging, and that's what creates cultural divides. Professional men, postal workers, clerical worker, and others with position rail constantly at the loud, boisterous, uncouth behavior of other segments of the society. Some Negroes just didn't care. They would be as loud, as boisterous, and as bad-mannered as they wanted to be. Now, on one hand, this could be viewed as rebellious authenticity because they're expressing themselves freely exactly how they wanted to. And on the other hand, this could be viewed as untamed and a lack of self-control, which makes most people feel uncomfortable because they're unsure what other behavior might follow. Now, for Negroes who promoted middle-class manners, it made them embarrassed. The respectable, educated, and refined believe in front, partly because it is their accustomed way of life and partly in order to impress the white world. So this group could be further divided based on intentions. One portion really promoted the respectable life because that's the way they really lived. But the other promoted it because they wanted to impress the white man. And guess what? You'll still find that avatar here today. There's some people who just shame blacks and they point out all their faults with no intention of helping them at all. They just want to push them down to create distance, so they appear to shine in front of the whites. I've seen this many times online. They only hit up the blacks and they never say anything about the whites. They come from this old stock of blacks who were obsessed with impressing the white world. The decisive measure of the man is how he acts in public. This is from the point of view of blacks in Bronzeville. What people did in private didn't matter as much as the front in public. All the measures of the man that we have described are either objective traits or types of behavior. More important, however, in placing people are their social relationships. People not only ask,
"What kind of person is he?"
They also want to know,
"What kind of family does he come from?
Who's in his crowd?
What kind of organizations does he belong to?"
which are important things to know. This gives a little insight into a person's character. Occupation, income, education, standard of living, and public behavior ultimately find their reflection in social groupings, meaning people gravitate towards like-minded people. There's no way around that. People who work certain jobs, behave similarly, have a certain education, many of them tend to have other things in common that influence their gravitation towards one another. They're on a similar wavelength. And being energetic beings in nature, humans surround themselves with people who mirror their priorities. Family background is not too important in Bronzeville. Why not? 3 generations ago, nearly all Negroes were slaves, and getting ahead by education and the acquisition of wealth have gone on at too fast a pace to allow any tradition of old families to mean much. So Negroes worked with what they had. They didn't have a long lineage of many wealth-building families. So for many, that time marked a beginning of a foundation for their progeny to build upon. But contemporary family behavior is very important in placing people. Far more important in placing people than their family connections are their clique affiliations. The rough rule that birds of a feather flock together is used to stratify people in Bronzeville. A man takes on the reputation of his crowd. If you hang out with pimps and thieves, then people associate their stereotypical behavior onto you, regardless if it's true or not. If you hang out with professionals, then likewise they assume. So your crowd becomes part of your reputation. In a rapidly changing society, clique affiliations become important for social mobility also. People may change their cliques easily and thus change their social personalities. What's a personality? It's a mask. It's a construct that you have unknowingly created and now you think is the real you. And there are varied aspects of that personality, and they express depending on the situation. So when people change their cliques, Like if they start hanging around goal-oriented people, the way they talk and their mannerisms start to change. That's the shift in the social personality. The cliques become selectors, and at the top of the society, the small high-status cliques become the social arbiters for the community. It has become fashionable for a broad section of Bronzeville's people to formalize their small cliques as social clubs devoted to card playing and dancing. Between society at the top and the disorganized masses at the bottom are several thousand of these social clubs. To belong to any of them, a person must discipline his behavior, keep up a front, and spend his money for socially approved types of clothing, entertainment, and whatever other appurtenances the social ritual requires, which means they created boundaries and borders around the club and who gets into it. And anyone who did not fit within those boundaries were excluded. Now think about this in relation to how the early colonists created their club. The boundaries they created said that members had to have a certain skin complexion, which they named white. And anyone who did not meet those requirements was excluded. That was a major key to their system of domination. So what I'm showing you here is that there are a number of ways that humans create boundaries to include and to exclude, whether that's legally, economically, or socially. In a very limited sense, churches too are ranked in a system of social prestige. Congregational and Episcopal churches are considered high status, holiness and spiritualist churches low status. Most churches, however, include people of all status levels. Neither the question, what church does he belong to, nor the question, does he go to church, is important in placing a man, except at the very top and the very bottom of the social scale. For persons on the make, or on the rise, getting the proper connections becomes extremely important. People change their status by acquiring money and education, and then changing their set, changing who they hang with. The dynamics of social mobility in Bronzeville can only be understood by observing individuals actually shifting from clique to clique, church to church, and club to club in the struggle to get ahead. The people who are in control this upward mobility by setting the standards and holding the line against those who don't make the grade. They also limit the number of persons who are accepted, creating the barriers, including and excluding. They're intertwined as two ends to the same pole. You can't do one without the other. As soon as you use the power to include, by default, there's some sort of exclusion that comes as a necessary outcome. And I'm planting these seeds little by little because understanding this dynamic is going to be very important down the road when we get into further studies. So pay attention. At the same time, the socially ambitious are able to copy the behavior of the strata above them and to bring new cliques, churches, and clubs into existence with the desired pattern. After a time, such new increments are accepted, and the ambitious rise as a group. Hopefully you have enjoyed this commentary. I thank you for your time and attention. My name is Brooklyn St. Michael, and I'll see you in the free world.